Hello, Math 153. What we're looking at in this lesson is 12.2, Measures of Central Tendency. More or less, the gist of this lesson is we are looking at mean, median, mode, and mid-range. Those four different words there. And what they do is they're each a different way to measure data. So the first one, this first page here actually is we're just going to read about some of the vocabulary. I'm not going to read all of this for you. I'm just going to make some highlights as it. I'd recommend you to make sure you really read through any of this, and if you have any questions on it, please reach out. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the mean. Now we're going to see the mean represented by a notation that looks like this. It's going to be an X with a little bar across it. Now this is actually what we call an X bar. This notation is going to represent the mean. So if you see the X bar, you want to think mean. We know that the mean is the sum of the data items divided by the number of data items. And we're going to represent that with a little formula here, and it's going to look like this. We're going to have this symbol right there. That's actually a sigma. It's a Greek letter. And then we follow it by the X over an N. Now what this means, the numerator here, we're going to say the sum of all the X's. That's what that is. The sum of the X. And we're dividing it by n, which is the number of data items. And like I said, this notation here, this sigma, this is a Greek letter. And that's the sigma. But it represents the sum of something. So it represents the sum of all the data, and n represents the number of data items. The median, that's just going to be the middle data item. The most important thing about the median is this number 1 here. The data items have to be arranged in order from smallest to largest, or largest to smallest would also work, but they must be into order. Mode is most common. That's could just be, that one's pretty straightforward. It's most common value. And the mid-range here is we have to take the lowest data value, add it to the highest, divide it by 2. So you take the lowest and the highest and divide it by 2. So make sure you're familiar with those vocab words. So now let's look at an example of these. So now let's look at the next one, which would be median. Median is the middle number. So that's what we want to talk about. It's the middle. And if it's an odd number, it's at one piece in middle. If you have two even numbers, you'd have to average them together. But we have to make sure the data is our last one we had here was the mid-range. You take the lowest and the highest and divide it by 2. So the one we have here is calculating the mean for a frequency distribution. Now, these are what we looked at in 12.1, the frequency distribution. Remember, the numbers here on the left-hand column, those are going to be the different ratings, in this case, stress ratings. The frequency, the numbers in the right here, are how many people answered with that particular rating. So for example, 2 people said they had a stress rating of 0 and so forth. So that's what those represent. And we're just going to use this to calculate the mean. Now, we're also going to go through how to do it on your calculator as well, but we're going to first start by doing it by hand. Now, one of the things you need to do is we need to figure out we need to add all these things up. Now we have to be careful because when we add these up, we have to keep in mind there are 2 zeros, 1, 1, 3 2s, 12 3s, 16 4s, and so forth. So if I were to, let's say if we wanted to make a list of all these data values, we know that we have 2 zeros. We have 1 1. We have 3 2s, so 1, 2, 3. We have 12 3s, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. But that would get very tedious to write all those out because we'd have to have 31 7s, 26 8s, and so forth. But we don't want to write all them out. So what we can do is take each column and multiply it together. For example, going across the columns, think of there being a multiplication sign right here and an equal sign over here. 0 times 2 is 0. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 3 is going to give us 6. 3 times 12 is 36. 4 times 16 is going to be 64. If you need to, use your calculator, 5 times 18, and so forth. I want you to pause the video and go ahead and rewrite or write in the rest of those values as you multiply them. Okay, and you'll see that I have all my values there. So then what we want to do is we want to find out what our n is, meaning how many data items do we have. So we need to add up the frequency. Remember, just like we looked at in 12.1, when you add up all of these, that's going to give you your n. So go ahead, pause the video, and add all them up. Okay, when you find that, you find n equals 151. So that means the 151 surveys were pulled for this specific study, if you will. So 101 or 151 people answered this. Now we want to find out what was the total amount. Remember, we said the mean is you add up everything divided by the number of data items. So now we need to add up all the numbers, meaning if we would continue this list, we'd want to add all those up. But what we can do is just take the sum of all of these values to make it a lot easier. So go ahead and add all those up now. Right, when you find that, we find a total here of 975. If you did not get that, make sure you go back and see if you can find where your mistake was. Now we can go ahead and find our mean. So our x bar, keep in mind the formula here is we have to take the sum of all the x's and divide it by our n. Well, the x bar here is going to be the sum of all of our values, which would be that 975, divided by our n, which is 151. So that tells us it's approximately, when we divide this out in the calculator, 6.46 would be our mean. So that's saying the mean stress stress level for these students is going to be just about 6.5 is going to be that stress level. Now, this one doesn't ask us to find anything else, but let's go ahead and work through the other parts here. So we already found the mean. Now, in this case, the data is ranged from smallest, which is up here, down to the largest. We want to find the middle value. Well, if there's 101 or 151 total items, so I'm going to come over here. Let's just say median. If we take this 151 and divide it by 2, so if when we take 151 and divide it by 2, we get this 75.5. So that tells us the approximately the 75th data item is going to be the middle value here. Again, we're not going to line all these up like we did here and count them out and try to find the middle. But what we can do is look at the frequencies and figure out where does the 75th data item fall. So we can start by adding. Take your 2 to start with, then add a 1 to it, then add a 3, then add a 12, then add a 16. And if I hit enter, we're at 34. We need to keep going because we need to get to 75. So then we add 18 to that. That gives us 52. We need to keep going. Add 13, which takes us up to 65. We're still not quite there yet, but now when we add 31 to that, we get up to 96. So that tells us that that 75th data item lies right here. So therefore, the median stress level would be a 7. So we could say the median stress level is a 7. That would be the median. And again, we said this value here is the mean. Now, mode was the most common. So if we want to keep going here with the mode, you want to find, okay, which one of these values occurs most frequently? And we can see here that, again, 14, 15, stress level 7 occurs most frequently. So the mode is also going to be 7. And then likely do that one easily in our head. The lowest is 0, the highest is 10. Add them together, you get 10 divided by 2, you'd get 5. So the mid-range here would be 5. Okay, so now what I'd like you to do, I want you to take this data set right here, and I want you to find the mean, the median, the mode, and the mid-range. I'll complete it on mine and then come back and check your work. Okay, now looking at this, we find that our mean is a 76.67 approximately. The median, they were in order, so I just crossed them off. So 52 and 92, they get crossed off. 69, 86. We're left with these two in the middle, so we have to find the average, which gives us a median of 80.5. Mode, most common, which is an 86. And then the mid-range, lowest plus highest divided by 2 gives us a 72. Now, it says compute your final scores using the same A, B, C, D, F scale that we have to find these. So we see that if we are going off the median grade, this student would have a C. If we went off the the mean grade, they would have a C. The median grade, they would actually have a B. The mode, they would also have a B. In the mid-range, they would have a C. So if you had to choose, if these were your scores, which grading scale would you choose? And you'd probably choose either the median or the mode because they both give you a higher score overall. That's all I have for 12.2, but I want to walk through with you pretty quickly about how to do this on the calculator. Now, in order to do so, I'll have to create another video. So there's going to be kind of a part 2 for 12.2, and I'll actually open up a calculator that's very similar to yours, and I'll show you how to do these on your calculator. So please watch the part 2 video for calculator tips, and that'll also help us out when we move on to the next section as well. Thank you, and good luck on the homework.